Okay, sir. Colonel Rathore was commissioned into Maratha Light Infantry of the Indian Army in 1980. He is an alumni of OTA Chennai. He served in active operations in Assam, Jammu and Kashmir, Rajasthan, and Punjab. He writes about defense and security skills, risk and threat, and nature and environment. He is a familiar face on national TV channels. Colonel Rathod has drafted occupational national standards on security, equine, canine, and zoo animals. He commanded 17th Battalion of Maratha Light Infantry during Operation Rakshak and Parakram. Colonel Rathod is presently director at Quantum Resource Consultant and Equine Ferry Foundation. Colonel Rathod, sir, chair of the session. Over to you, sir. Thank you. Please unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you, Rishi and Vijay sir, for your kind words. And good morning to everybody. I'm too least to say that I'm very unnerved. My friend Sandeep Kumar has successfully brought me into the ambush of 3 lieutenant generals. So, and I know 2 of them, so I hope they would be kind to me. Anyway, so the today's topic is very interesting. If anybody thinks that it's of a recent origin, I think he would be or she would be wrong. While doing some research and study on this topic, I found that Sun Tzu and our own Chanakya have written about it profusely in their treatise of statecraft. So this particular topic has been there in the affairs of state since time immemorial. The only thing is that its intensity and its proliferation and its various arms like Hydra have developed with the advent of technology and with the necessity of hitting an enemy or damaging a state with socio-economic, political, and what have you, all arms and organs of the state. So its reach has become very wide today. In milder terms, when we talk about gray zone warfare, a mild term is known as soft power. When somebody hums a Bollywood song in Africa, in Pakistan, in Middle East, we don't mean any harm. But we are ruling, occupying few million neurons in his or her head. And that is the beginning, that is the seed of gray zone warfare. That is the place from where you can play or pitch the gray zone warfare. It is benign and it is utmost malign in its virulent form. So gray zone warfare in today's world, when we have so much of reach of social media in the hands of neo IT savvy population, when we have a gullible population, when we have unscrupulous politicians, when we have our social and moral and ethical moorings giving way to westernization and other cultures, it becomes very difficult for us to guard ourselves. And unfortunately, as Indian society, as Indian nation, we find ourselves in the middle of this whirlwind, in this vortex. We are there inside, and we got to save ourselves. Gullibility of population is one thing which can really play havoc. Recently seen in the unfortunate air crash which took our CDS, the things started coining of Chinese interference, Russian interference, conspiracy angle, and whatnot, because we are at heart gullible. We are somewhere very suspicious of government media. These are the breeding grounds of gray zone warfare. Saying this thing in infantry parlance, Rajiv sir, we are in the beaten zone of the medium machine gun and machine guns. We are right there. So there has been a very thin delineation and dividing line. What is permitted in soft power parlance? What is permitted in international relations? And what is obnoxious, maligned, and motivated in these spheres? And we often transgress. This is happening because of the swift nature of technology we have around us. Today, gray zone warfare is the most cost-effective thing a nation state which is inimical to us can wage against us. In other words, we are ripe enough now. We have seen the proxy war, amalgamation of all these qualities, raising in our Jammu and Kashmir for over now 3.5 decades. So we have seen it. We have been victim of it. And must say that we have very bravely blunted it. So this is not something which is very, very difficult to deal with, but it's there. Today, India is at crossroads as far as the external and internal threats are concerned. We used to talk about two-front war. Today, we are seeing two-front war a reality, and two-front standoff even more bigger reality. We find China as a major adversary today. Internal situations also are not very kind to us. So in these perspectives, if we see, so gray zone warfare assumes importance. It merits consideration. It merits national doctrine. It merits self-discipline. Is such a cost-effective thing which can hollow a nation, a society from inside. It can affect your economy. It can tear your social fabric. It can weaken your military. It can, and it is doing, sublet and lease out your national interest like we are seeing in Pakistan, in African countries, through which the Belt Road Initiative is ripping through, and the nations are forced to lease out their strategic ports, airports, mineral wealth, oceanic wealth, and what you have. So these are the things which are manifesting around us. And I think this particular topic is very, very timely. It is very, very pertinent that we must discuss and also let the policymakers aware of this, what is happening. So coming to this, without taking much time, I would introduce first speaker of the day, Lieutenant General Rajiv Bhalla. If Bhalla sir, you remember, I think we have done couple of courses together, and I was always overawed by your scholarly and achievements in those courses. Because of you, I never got an XI in any course because you always took that. So, Rajiv Bhalla has a wonderful record of operational and administrative experience, which cannot be summed up in a brief biodata. Suffice to say, he has served in IMTROT. He has been Director General Military Training, and he has been the Military Secretary, a coveted appointment. He has interacted with foreign armies, gained valuable experience, and got a chance to understand their doctrine and functioning. His operational and administrative experience spans many terrains, many operational requirements. Today, he is going to speak to us on challenges in the gray zone warfare. I would request him to also include, I'm sure he must be having a good script on this, challenges to whom? Challenges to the victim state or the perpetrator state? I'm sure he would do full justice to the topic. Lieutenant General Rajiv Bhalla. Thank you.
Please unmute. Balla sir, please unmute.
Unmute.
General, you've been unmuted, sir. Please unmute yourself, General.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Please.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
thank you. I wish to thank the chair and and the words that you've spoken about me. I'm extremely honored, and I consider it a privilege to be part of this webinar and talking to IIRF on this great opportunity given to me. Good morning to all the attendees firstly. You see, wars have ceased to become effective instruments for achieving political or military objectives. They are far too expensive and unaffordable, and at the same time, there is uncertainty about the outcome. This statement was made by NSA last month, which clearly indicates that war is not an option today, and the country is unwilling to go to war to achieve the political objectives. Therefore, we need to look at other means to fulfill our stated goals. Same is the case with many other countries of the world, implying that militaries are today being nurtured for self-preservation, economic development, and to counter the bane of terrorism. World history is replete with warfare amongst societies, among tribes, among kingdoms, and we've seen how war has progressed from spears to automatic guns and to fourth to fifth generation weapons and equipment. Each new piece of military technology resulted in a change the way nations fought and tactics were utilized. With the arrival of new technologies and innovations in weaponry, warfare underwent huge evolution over the past 200 to 300 years. We saw the World War I and II brought with it huge changes in technology and the way warfare was waged. The advances in weaponry led to some of the most brutal warfare and widespread destruction ever seen. In case we want to know how the nature of wars has changed over a period of time, it is important to understand and study the changes which happened in the military equipment. In World War I, we saw the trench warfare. In World War II, we saw tanks, the mechanized warfare, and subsequently we saw the development of air power and the sea power. Thereafter, there was the evolution of asymmetric warfare and the non-state actors getting involved against the regular army. We have enough examples in Vietnam, the Malaysian insurgency, the Mujahideens in Afghanistan, and of course the proxy war which is going on in India. Subsequently, this further went into the realms of hybrid warfare, which made the wars more complex. Hybrid warfare is considered to be distinct from regular warfare to the extent that besides the state, non-military actors and other stakeholders are fully involved in the entire spectrum of war. Grey zone warfare is that spectrum of warfare which has come into being recently over the past few years. It has probably evolved due to the pressures of extensive legal and political compulsions in the international arena. Nations undertaking grey zone campaigns make strong efforts to justify their actions under the international norms and international law. Till recently, we saw the advent of new technological advanced weapons, and the concepts and doctrines were evolved based on the weapon systems developed. However, post this new thought process, the paradigm shift has taken place from fighting the fight that fit one's weapons. I repeat again, fighting the fight that fits one's weapon, implying that a nation or an organization or the armed forces change their doctrines, change their strategy to fit the weapons which get developed. And this is changed to what? Making the weapons to fit the fight. That you decide on how you want to fight and you make the weapons accordingly. There is a vast difference between the two, which the military tacticians must understand and imbibe the nuances. This terminology was first used by the two Chinese authors who have written the book Unrestricted Wars, which is nearly 25 years ago. Prior to the recognition and defining of grey zone conflicts, the victory in wars was recognized by capture of territory and defined by the achievement of political objectives. This was categorically and brought out by General Kamath yesterday about this, that the ends are the same. In grey zone warfare also it is no different, and the basis of any campaign would continue to have political objectives at the national level. However, it is the ways and means that have undergone a major change, and wars may no longer be swift, intense, and short wars as it was envisaged. The US Department of Defense has given a definition on grey zone warfare as being a conceptual space between peace and war, occurring when actors purposefully use multiple elements of power to achieve political and security objectives, with activities that are ambiguous or cloud attribution and exceed the threshold of ordinary competition, yet fall below the level of large-scale direct military conflict. Iran defines grey zone as an operational space between peace and war involving coercive actions to change the status quo below a threshold level. In most cases, it would prompt a conventional military response, often by blurring the line between military and non-military actions and the attribution for events. I think what needs to be understood is that while the definition is absolutely clear, but what is not clear is the physical dimension of this type of a conflict or the spectrum of conflict, which is extremely vast, and I would say it is limitless. Now, coming on to the characteristics, I think before I come to the challenges, it is important for us to know the characteristics. And while this kind of a warfare is still evolving and being grasped, it definitely has some unique characteristics. First and foremost, the spectrum of activities are kept below the threshold of physical war to avoid a military response so that it cannot be considered violation of recognized international norms or laws. The aggressor would attempt to disguise his role and would avoid attributability in any form. The next characteristics is the violative activities are undertaken by the aggressor over a prolonged period of time. It would start slow with minor and innocuous irritants and get aggressive in due course of time. These activities could spread over decades too. We have seen the Chinese examples in Taiwan, in the South China Sea, and along our northern borders on this. The next unique characteristic is while the activities stay below the threshold level, the possibility of escalation cannot be ruled out. It would all depend on the circumstances and the activities as perceived by the affected nation. However, it is unlikely to result in a full-fledged military war, but could result in a border skirmish in case of a neighbor or a retaliatory action in the areas of interest of the aggressor. The example of Kargil war in 99 is absolutely clear, where Musharraf thought that he could reach and occupy the vacated heights thinking that nothing would happen. But India's response was offensive. They went in for a limited war and evicted them. However, in such a scenario, the aggressor could also respond and enhance escalation to include kinetic action, resulting in spiraling of physical means towards a warlike situation. However, since Pakistan didn't have the will, didn't have the capacity, didn't have the capability, they did not even think of doing this. The next unique characteristic is the targets could be military or non-military targets which have critical vulnerabilities and is likely to force the target country to accept their contention. I remember in 98, while doing the High Command, one of the officers wrote a thesis on non-military threats. At that point of time, it was considered that it's only academic exercise wherein these non-military threats are being highlighted and are being discussed. But it is just slightly over 2 decades now we realize that these are actually become a reality and we are going to face non-military threats at a much higher level than probably a conventional war threat. Same is the case about, I would say, 13 years ago in one of the international discussions we were having, we were discussing on an issue of which is a greater threat, the threat of terror or is it the threat of cyber? And I would like to highlight here that more than half the people felt the threat of terror is greater than the threat of cyber, probably because of the 9/11 incident, which was probably playing heavily on their mind. While I felt that the threat of terror is going to be limited in time and in space, while the threat of cyber is actually going to be pan that country and it could last a long time and could leave scars which are much longer to heal, which will take much longer to heal. Certain strong activities relating to grey zone conflict by the aggressor could be justified to the international community by virtue of historical and geographical claims. We are aware of our northern borders again in Arunachal Pradesh, the McMahon line of 1914, which is being taken advantage of by the Chinese, saying that we have only initialed it and we had not accepted the contention of the British at that point of time. The other issue is the non-acceptance of instrument of succession, which Maharaja Hari Singh had signed for J&K, which has not been accepted by Pakistan, saying that this was forced upon the Maharaja, and they will be able to convince certain international bodies also on this, which is a sad part. It will be observed that such a campaign can easily be undertaken by non-democratic governments in power due to their potential to impose checks on the media and public utterances. Vis-a-vis democracies where everything is in the open and there are public debates which take place, there's media which is scrounging around to ensure that they get all the information. Now coming on to the Indian context of the grey zone warfare. Like the chair brought out, it is nothing new. It has already been on for past so many centuries. Therefore, I would say it's not a new type of warfare for us, except for the phrase which is being coined by the Western world. India has faced grey zone warfare in the past for so many years, only that we've known it by some other name, and that is the no war, no peace name. And we've been calling this for the last maybe more than about 25, 30 years. Historically, this kind of campaign has been fought ever since Mahabharata, the Mughals, the British, and the proxy war, and the Chinese intrusion being the latest. When Kauravas called the Pandavas for a game of dice, actually we could say that it was a grey zone warfare. And the entire actions which were initiated by Lord Krishna before the war in terms of distributing the forces, he taking sides, which could again be said it is within the realms of grey zone. The Pakistan's initiative in 1974 and 1977 by Zia-ul-Haq and Bhutto saying that we'll bleed India by 1,000 cuts is again within the realms of grey zone warfare. Chinese actions ever since 1959 in terms of intrusions in Arunachal, in terms of intrusions towards Aksai, supporting the rebels in the northeast. The recent examples of Doklam and Galwan are absolutely clear cases of grey zone warfare. However, what is important to understand is that the Indian philosophy has always been limited to peaceful resolution of all disputes, while this has not been the case with our neighbors. Instigating our minorities and inducing religious divides are some of the grey zone actions we need to recognize, and we need to acknowledge that these are actually grey zone conflicts or campaigns which have been imposed on us. While in conventional operations we plan to defend our territory and thereafter take the battle into enemy territory and capture vital areas in depth, however, will this philosophy work in grey zone warfare? It is to be studied, and we need to prepare our stance and strategy accordingly. While we've been subjected to this grey zone warfare and we fought it well, we fought it extremely well, but should we continue this ever again for the years to come, or we need to change our strategy? I think we need to study this. While the think tanks are already studying this kind of a warfare, I'm not sure if the people in service, the tacticians, the strategists, the analysts in service who are sitting on the chairs of power, are they studying to the same extent as the think tanks are doing? Now coming to the challenges. How to prepare and formulate a strategy for an invisible war. It is not only invisible, but may even be perceived by some of the literates that they are being subjected to this warfare. They may also not realize that we are subjected to this campaign, we are undergoing this campaign. The first thing which is important is that we need to restructure the institutions. I'm talking about the international institutions primarily. The international institutions which cropped up and which got formed to avoid conventional wars was primarily the UN and some of the other institutions which came up. But they were all mandated and structured to ensure to avoid and bloodshed in conventional ops. And they managed it very well so far, and they maintained peace, they maintained harmony. They also ensured that they built up the fragile states. But what is important to understand is that they need to now change their mandates. They need to restructure themselves for effectively dealing with this new kind of conflict. Will this be possible? This is a question we need to ask. If we look at the history of UN over more than over 2 decades, there have been a lot of discussions on revamping of the UN to look at the new kind of issues which crop up. But there's been no success at all. There's been no consensus on definition of terror so far. So it's questionable whether these organizations can be restructured with new mandates to do this, because the permanent 5 are divided into power blocks. The countries are jostling for supremacy, and everybody has their own agenda to grind actually, and own axe to grind. Now, what would happen also in due course of time, which is envisaged, is the divide between the rich and the poor is likely to widen due to exploitation by the rich and the powerful. The weak and the poor nations which are rich in resources are likely to get exploited by the powerful. And I personally visualize, this is my personal opinion, that we may see the resurgence of colonial type of culture trend by those being exploited. The examples are already beginning to arise. The examples of Pakistan, the examples of Sri Lanka, and the example of Uganda, a recent one, wherein China is trying to pressurize them and trying to override their probably democratic systems which are there. The other challenges which I have identified are primarily at the national level what we need to do. One is gone at the national level as we as Indians need to do. Besides the philosophy of conventional war, we need to evolve a philosophy to prepare for a war which is beyond the imagination of most citizens. We need to strategize against information, cyber, financial, economic, and any other type of subversive activities which could take place. We will need to redefine our definition of act of war and will need to include all non-military domain activities which are limitless. The understanding of war by a common man is physical action. Therefore, the common man on the street will need to understand that invisible cyber attacks on the institutions or power grids or any other infrastructure or installation is an act of aggression by the inimical powers. In this type of warfare, the superficial facade may be extremely peaceful and have no linkage and may not be visible between the economic relationship and waging a grey zone campaign, which is happening today. A common man, a trader, a businessman is not looking at it and is not establishing a linkage. Both can go on simultaneously with even the status of a most favored nation tag, which is India is given to Pakistan. The next major challenge is social media. Over a period of time, social media could influence mindsets amongst the multicultural and multi-religious society of our country, thereby creating turbulence and adversely affecting the bonhomie amongst various sections of the population. We've already seen how fraud and influence messages on these sites get believed to be true. The other component major issue is role of media. In the grey zone kind of a conflict, the media will have a major and a significant role to play. However, the nation will need the media to allay the misinformation campaign of the aggressor and utilize the services to sensitize the population on the ongoings and make them aware of the implications of the campaign. They will need to get away from the TRP competitive mode and play a role to bring down the public sentiments and the anxieties caused by the social sites. Is the media ready for that? Yesterday again the media issue was discussed and we felt it may not be easy for the media to get on board to see that they are able to allay the fears and put across the issues which need to be put across about national interest to the media, to the public. It is therefore felt that media needs to come under a national level agency to ensure that they are able to put across a balanced view which meets our national interests. The next challenge, major challenge, is the role of the military. While the military prepares for a kinetic war in its entirety, it will need to simultaneously understand and learn the non-military facets of war. The other agencies and the forces will need to work in tandem for a successful fight against such a threat. Are we learning from the environment what is happening? Are our people learning? Or we need to teach them in our training institutions? While the training institutions teaches only a small section of the entire armed forces, it is important that the entire culture of this grey zone warfare, all-out warfare which is happening, to be imbibed by those in service and understood extremely well. Next point is coordination of action. An apex body will need to be created to take stock and coordinate all the agencies which have a role to counter the grey zone warfare activities. Military option. We need to look at some of the military options which are there. Military power and numerical superiority is unlikely to deter grey zone warfare activities by the aggressor. We may not desire to counter the grey zone warfare with a kinetic response. Therefore, there is a need to evolve various forms of warfare which should be executed by staying below the thresholds of conventional war. Various options, contingencies will need to be formulated and practiced. We've seen Pakistan's behavior over the last few decades. Post Kargil intrusions, the way they were beaten back and the way they suffered losses, they have not come off the hook and they have not stopped undertaking the proxy war. Thereafter, post the Uri retaliation, post the Pulwama retaliation, while there was a pause for some time, but they're back to their normal self and they are continuing with it. Should we continue to suffer this and be subjected to this kind of a thing is an issue which needs to be discussed and highlighted. I think we need to adopt a proactive approach and see that we treat these people with the same and give them the same treatment that we have undergone for the last so many decades. Vulnerability of automation. Due to large, huge dependency of hardware and software from external sources, these are extremely vulnerable to gray zone activities. They could be infected with malware to adversely affect the systems at the critical juncture. The next challenge is economic dependence. We as a nation have been heavily dependent on Chinese goods, and despite the clarion call on Made in India and Atmanirbhar, the imports from China have only increased than being reduced. The dependency of our manufacturing on Chinese materials is huge and cannot be done away with easily. They have been successful in making cheap goods and exporting, making the world dependent on their goods. And that is why this kind of a behavior by the international community towards China, they are not sure how they need to react. We need to overcome the concept of L1 and give a boost to our own industry and manufacturing, even if at the cost of being expensive. The government must find a way to circumvent this anomaly and get over the Chinese imports that we are into. The last point of the challenge which I like to cover is personal preferences. We are more individualistic and family oriented than a united and cohesive nationalistic group. Our personal interests and views should not override the need to be united against the unseen enemy and invisible war at the time of crisis. Again, despite the clarion call to stop buying Chinese goods, have we stopped buying? Have we stopped using the Chinese apps? Is a question we need to answer ourselves. While the challenges are numerous and one can go on at all kind of levels, strategic level, national level, operational level, tactical level, but these are the major challenges which we need to face and probably some more which will in due course of which come. In conclusion, I would only like to say, do we need to continue with our defensive strategy and philosophy of peace and be subjected to gray zone campaign activities? Or should we proactively adopt a stance to execute certain non-military activities against our inimical powers and put them on the back foot and be given the same treatment that we have been subjected to for the past so many years? Being a nation with continued conflict-like situations, these could adversely affect our economic growth curve and have an impact on our GDP and other developmental programs. Presently, we do not have the right instruments to counter the grey zone warfare. We need to create these in an early time frame and make them effective, probably the way we created the National Disaster Management Agency. The diversity of our population, while it is a tremendous asset, it should not become a disadvantage to divide us on religious, lingual, and cultural differences, which the inimical powers are being trying, and there seems to be an increase which is going to be happen. We need to stop this to survive and to ensure that we grow at the scale that we wish to grow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, General Bhalla. Wonderful speech, very good script. While we would invite question and answers at the end of the thing, without wasting any time, I take great pleasure in inviting Lieutenant General Krishnan, on the topic of political interference by China and Pakistan. Lieutenant General Krishnan has been former Defense Chief of the Army Staff. He has been closely associated with perspective planning and modernization of the armed forces. He has a tremendous amount of operational and administrative experience in various echelons of command during his career. And he has been on the board of directors of Bharat Electronics Limited and Bharat Dynamics Limited, and is considered an authority on defense modernization and defense production. I invite him to give a perspective on political interference by Pakistan and China, while General Bhalla spoke on the military and non-military threats. It would be interesting hearing General Krishnan on political interference and their manifestation in grey zone warfare. General Krishnan.
Thank you very much for that very generous introduction, Colonel Rathore, and it's a pleasure meeting you. Unfortunately, I don't think we had too much of opportunity of meeting or knowing while in service. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me thank the President IIRF, Colonel Vijay, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this webinar. I have become part of this webinar just yesterday, late night. And a small correction to what Colonel Rathore said. This topic which was to be covered by Colonel General Kandare is not the one which I am covering. I will only give a very brief overview in the form of some random thoughts. Since I've come in at short notice, I've tried and not tread on any of the topics covered by some of the specialists yesterday, some who are to follow today, and also people who will be following today. So that's the only one. With that backdrop, I will start. I am not covering the topic which the chair mentioned with due apologies. All that I will do is to give an overview, to try and put all things together, to that too in the form of just random thoughts in a very random manner. Chair, I hope that is acceptable, Colonel Rathore.
My pleasure, sir. It will
Thank
be
you.
a pleasure to listen to your overview and random thoughts.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have already had some of the best specialists and subject experts focus on certain specific facets of this very, very important and contemporary topic. I will, like I elaborated, try and give you an overview and in the form of some very, very random thoughts. Coming to military capability, now apart from other things, military capability actually prevents a war. Credible capability, even if it is short of parity, deters an adversary from waging an armed conflict against a country. While for a country like India, maintaining a credible military capability to prevent war will remain a compulsion, at least in the foreseeable future, even for the strongest and richest countries, waging war is no more a preferred option. But at the same time, nations, especially the stronger nations, feel compelled to subdue and impose their will on other nations. With armed conflict becoming less preferred and moving out of the way as far as it can be avoided, gray zone warfare actually emerges as an attractive option. It is also a very, very effective tool to express dissatisfaction and impose one's country's will on a targeted country. Grey zone warfare, ladies and gentlemen, has already been very lucidly brought out. It's all encompassing and includes everything and almost anything, is very open in its scope, covers everything other than war and remaining just below the threshold of conventional war. Technology keeps adding tools for gray zone warfare continuously, and as we progress in time, newer and newer dimensions and domains keep getting added to this. Apart from the fact that gray zone warfare carries the term warfare with it, it goes well beyond warfare as we perceive the term warfare and pervades into every facet of activity in today's world. It is therefore as much, if not more, a domain outside the military than just a military man's domain. This, to my mind, is extremely important to understand, because otherwise the policy makers will leave it at the defense as a defense ministry's baby, and the defense ministry will leave it as the services baby. Ladies and gentlemen, the way I look at it, the domain of this particular domain, there is more outside the spheres of the services and the defense than what is within it. This is very, very critical. Otherwise, it will remain addressed in a very narrow spectrum. I will try to elaborate or touch upon this as I go along. Gray zone warfare is nothing new in concept, as it was elaborately touched upon by the chair in his opening address, and it has been in vogue since time immemorial. It's just that an open, interconnected world and quantum jumps in technology in almost every facet of life on a regular basis has set an ideal stage for gray zone warfare to flourish. What has made it so effective and attain today's levels where it is actually competing for primacy with actual armed conflict? One, an open, interconnected world with close international linkages and dependencies, whether it be economic, diplomatic, political, social, or military. And two, communication. The ability to reach out and condition people's minds and perception, even in the remotest corners of the world, with just a mobile phone and access to the all-pervasive social media. Data has become a great asset and a very critical weapon. Three, vulnerability of every facet of a nation's affairs: economical, political, educational, healthcare, social life, public perception, and even military system. All these have become vulnerable due to the unavoidable dependence upon digital platforms and extensive exposure of people to social media and public domain. It is also a fact that we have, particularly in a democratic country like India, a sizable number of unemployed or underemployed media professionals, disgruntled veterans and ex-civil servants, people with differing political ideologies, and cutthroat corporate and political rivalry and competition, which creates a sizable section of people who are easy prey to be exploited by an adversary very effectively as tools for gray zone warfare. Just imagine, there are a number of world-class reputed universities around the world today facing financial distress, which are being bailed out through financial support from all sorts of agencies and countries, who gain in exchange for the financial support they give, they gain control over them. These are all very effective tools for gray zone warfare. Now, with that as a very, very general background, it may be simpler for us to understand that the ease with which aims and objectives, which were hitherto achieved through armed conflicts, can now be achieved through gray zone means. Gray zone means and tools have far more wider and far deeper impact than weapons, and that too with a much higher degree of deniability. They can be executed at will on a continuous daily basis, using economic means, using technology, artificial intelligence, by denying technology, through diplomatic means, through social media, propaganda, through political means, and by targeting the social, regional, and religious fissures, sensitivities, fault lines, etc., of a country or a region within a country. A gray zone warfare also has the advantage of, it can just bypass all your strengths, whether it is a military strength, whether it is a strength by way of democratic systems, freedom enjoyed by citizens, etc. Now, democratic systems, freedom enjoyed by citizens, etc., is considered to be the strengths of a democratic nation or a democratic system. But in fact, democratic systems and institutions such as independent media, judiciary, freedom of expression, etc., are so extensively and easily used and exploited to conduct gray zone warfare against a democratic country. Showing one's gray zone strength to the adversary through selective display and demonstration by way of, for example, a short one-term display of ability to disrupt a country's power grid, banking system, nuclear facilities, or even going up to a soft, hard, masked drone strikes, etc. There could be targeted killings, there could be bio strikes. That list is really endless, and these can be carried on seamlessly. It does not you don't have to declare war. You pretend as if you have no part to play in it. Now, each of these facets of domains which I just glossed over and very, very superficially touched upon, each of these is an expandable domain, a huge world by itself with immense scope. Subject specialists have already given us a glimpse into some of them yesterday, and some I suppose will follow today. The challenge, ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, therefore, is not so much about the wherewithal or the capability, but it is a challenge, particularly in our case, the challenges that we face with respect to gray zone warfare are: one, a lack of a clear understanding of the gray zone challenge and acceptance of its existence as a big real threat which has already been unfolded and put into effect. Two, to understand that democratic systems and institutions, legal systems, domestic and international politics, etc., place a great deal of constraint on democratic governance, on countering gray zone warfare challenges, as well as for employing one's own gray zone warfare tools against our adversaries. And three, we lack an agency to get our act together. The assets, human or material, by its very nature, must and will remain dispersed, spread across the country and even across the world. And there has to be an agency with requisite powers vested in it to coordinate and control it. Let me also add, before I close, that despite the tremendous strides, significance, and the actual practice of gray zone warfare in today's world, in an environment like what we have in the subcontinent, armed forces will remain an absolute necessity and will remain the primary security arm as far as security is concerned in the foreseeable future. Gray zone warfare will be waged. It is already being waged against us and will continue to be a part of our day-to-day life, pervading all areas of national activity as an entity by itself in normal times, and as and when an armed conflict is waged against us as complementary to the armed conflict. There is a need, ladies and gentlemen, to create awareness about gray zone warfare across the entire spectrum, covering the academia, the judiciary, media, political leaders, and the public at large. As much as there is a need for a deep understanding of the subject by our military leaders, strategic thinkers, and policymakers. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That's all that I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your very precise and short address. And there are many lessons to take home. And we would discuss this thing during the question answer session. I would like to introduce Lieutenant General Dushyanth Singh, who is from Maratha Light Infantry, my own regiment. He has a varied experience. He has been to United Nations peacekeeping. He has served with National Security Guard. He has many tenures in the Eastern Command. Very well read. He is a professor, perhaps the only one amongst us. And he is going to talk to us on the organizational aspect and doctrinal needs to counter the influences of grey zone warfare. Having heard General Bhalla and General Krishnan, who have portrayed the threats and perils of grey zone warfare, it comes naturally to our mind how to escape, how to counter, and what sort of preparation is required to counter this malign campaign. So I think General Dushanth's talk will give us some answers to this hazy thing, because for me, grey zone warfare in initial stage is like a needle in haystack. We really don't know where it is till it manifests and becomes so virulent. So without losing any time, I would like to invite General Dushyant Singh for his talk on organizational aspects and doctrinal needs to counter the influence of grey zone warfare. General Dushyant Singh. Thank you.
Thank you, Rathore sir, for a very generous introduction. I hope everybody can hear me.
We can, sir. Indeed. Yes, sir.
And I would also like to thank General Bhalla and General Krishnan. General Krishnan and self share the same chair. You were the Commandant War College, and I happen to have invited you also as Commandant War College on number of occasions to give a talk at the Higher Command course. In fact, both of you have actually laid down the problems which the country or which the world today faces as far as grey zone warfare is concerned, and the most difficult part is how to tackle it. So I will make an attempt, because world over there are no organizationally one single agency which is actually dealing with grey zone warfare. So I'll make an attempt. General P.R. Kumar had tried to do this in 2019 in an article in, I think, Clause, which I read, and I have tried to borrow some of the ideas from there and share with you all. So before that, I will share my screen, because being a slightly how do you share with the Webex?
If you can't share it, sir, you could forward it to me and I'll share it on your behalf.
You have to just say the full disk or something.
So you open your PPT and then it shows there's an icon called share. You could press that and then it will come up. Otherwise, you send it to me. I'll share it for you.
Okay, I've already opened the PPT.
You just press the share button, sir. It should come
Now
up.
you press the share button. It is down below at the bottom of these boxes. Mute, start video, share.
And in the PPT, I don't think so.
No, not PPT. That is your computer screen.
Yeah, that I'm doing. So it's saying open, grant access and system preferences.
Yes.
So I have to.
Rathore, I think you are supposed to grant him access, is it?
1 minute, I'll just see. Thank you for pointing out, sir. Change role, make presenter. Okay, I made you the presenter.
Yeah. Done?
Sir, yes, sir. You can start your presentation. Please go ahead, sir.
Not giving me access. Can you all see my presentation?
We can't, sir, but.
Yeah, so that means the access has not been granted.
Sir, I just made you presenter. I'm sorry, I did. Make presenter, yes. Ah, wonderful.
Did it come?
Utkarsh has used it.
I think everybody put off their videos. There's a bandwidth issue.
By the speakers he has to give. So I will focus myself essentially to the organizational aspects. Everyone has said that the origin of grey zone warfare is not a new phenomena. It has been happening since the past 2000 years. In fact, General Bhalla quoted Mahabharat. But I would go into the specifics of Chanakya for only one reason, and that is because it has a connect to the organization. So it all began in the 4th century BC, and thereafter it almost continued till 12th century AD. And thereafter, I think India somewhere lost the plot, and we became over focused on Vasudeva Kutumbakam. I may be a little outspoken in my approach as far as this particular phrase is concerned, but somewhere down the line, I think we shifted gear and moved away from grey zone type of activities. But today, if you see, nations are destined to remain in the gray domain, at least for a while. So if you look at Chanakya, what did he say? His basic tenets were never trust anyone blindly, test his loyalty. Employed externally and internally. That means actually Chanakya employed grey zone both for external purposes as well as for internal purposes, including the ministers of the government. Foreign policy was actually dictated by the fact that it was to be constantly influenced, and constantly the territory was to be expanded. And if you have to expand your territory, obviously he was using the means which were not only war but different measures such as conciliation. I mean, he would go to a king, the neighboring king, and try a conciliation process to make him a vassal, placate the opposing king or party. And if these two failed, then he would sow dissensions in the neighboring country or the country beyond that. And if all this failed, then only a use of force was done. So everywhere you find the common thread that the force always came in the end, and you found the gray zone means always being the first to be employed to achieve your national interest. So therefore, use of covert and the overt means by the king were the first resort. And why was it so? It was because of autocracy. So here I would like to make that connect, which most of the people have said, that it is very difficult in a democratic institutions, democratic countries, to actually wage a gray zone warfare successfully. We can do it. US is a very great example of how it does it. But there are certain organizations which are indulging in such a thing. Russia, I won't put it in the same category because Russia does have a kind of a single party type of a government where a person can remain in power either directly or indirectly. Putin is a very great example. Even when he was not in power, his word was actually what was playing out. So the tools of gray zone warfare have been in existence: propaganda, rebellion, uprisings, assassinations, poisoning, proxy war, black magic, use of agents, ascetics, and chemicals. These were all used by Chanakya. And that is what we must try to understand, that everything was here, and somewhere we lost the plot. But why I wanted to highlight this issue is he had a proper organization to wage a gray zone warfare, and that organization was headed by the king himself. King had directly the clandestine agents under him, and he had two lines. One line was the chancellor. Chancellor would be the would be an independent state coming under the king, or an independent area ruled by his representative, and he would have a similar organization of agents under him. The agents were of different kind: intelligence agents. There would be nuns. There would be priests. There would be chemical poisoners. I mean, Vish Kanya is a very common phenomena, but it was not that. Actually, he had people who could enter the opposing king or opposing parties arena, and undertake such operations after due and a deliberate planning. What I'm trying to get at here is even monks were used for gray zone warfare. What I'm trying to say is that there was a proper organization under the king and the chancellor working during the early ancient history of India. How do we look now? That is something which we need to. We have a PMO, CAPSEC, RAW, NSA, NSC, NSAB, ISRO. I'm just giving randomly certain organizations. Then we have MHA, IB, NIA, NTRO, CBI, respective forces intelligence. I'm talking of the Central Police Armed Forces, MAC, SMAC, NATGRID, and there was a talk about NCTC. Then we have respective state police, state armed police, state cyber cells, CID, etc., working on tangent on their own. Then you have the MOD lineup: MOD, DIA, DMI, DNI, DFI, Defense Cyber Agency, Defense Space Agency, SIG, and DIPEC. There are plethora of organizations. And then at the global level, you have the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism, UNODC, UNSCR, FATF, Interpol, space agencies, whatnot. We have a challenge in front of us if we really want to organize ourselves for gray zone warfare. Who is in the control? And this was referred to by General Krishnan, that we lack an agency to actually conduct gray zone warfare. Resources will be dispersed. So therefore, there is a need for aggregation, which is missing. We are in desperate need of an aggregation, a centralized, tighter coordination and control system. Inadequacies in offensive and defensive gray zone are, in fact, as far as India is concerned, I really do not see any agency which is actually seriously talking about it. In my view, ultimately, I think everything is left to the NSA. General Krishnan would be more familiar with this, being part of the NSAB. He would be able to throw some more light on this aspect. But my personal view is that as of today, we are absolutely scattered, disintegrated. We need an aggregated system to actually conduct gray zone warfare. So what were the modern origins? Again, people have already spoken about it. So I'm not going to repeat much about it, except to say that let's take gray zone warfare as an umbrella term. It's a term which encompasses a whole lot of phrases which we have been coining for the last, I think, 30 odd years: 4G, 5G, multi-domain operations, hybrid, proxy, unrestricted, cognitive, political, psychological, clandestine operations. It started finding mention somewhere around a decade back, when some of the Western think tanks and the security pundits started using it more frequently as gray zone warfare. But what is different this time is the advent of cyber, information, digital and artificial intelligence and space. I think these four factors have actually revolutionized the gray zone warfare. And I think we need to understand their implication to really see how gray zone warfare is to be managed organizationally. Otherwise, we will fail in our attempt to actually to organize and conduct gray zone warfare. So, taking a cue from here, what are the paradigms of gray zone warfare? I have taken it on two particular matrices. One is the organizational matrix, which is civil to military, and the second is the force matrix, that is peace to war. If you take these two matrices and combine them together, you will arrive at an organization and the force levels to be used, which can then help you in uh, understanding the organizational or the doctrinal needs for creating an organization. If you look at the organizational matrix, it starts from the civil to the military. Purely civil would mean routine in a country. Purely military would mean a proper full-fledged war. Somewhere between these are organizations like private citizens, organized criminals, state-owned enterprises. Then you have civil military fusion organizations. There are some organizations which have both the components like DRDO, etc. Then you have civil government entities which are purely civil, which are conducting, which can affect a gray zone warfare. Then you have the paramilitary forces, and finally you have the military. So this is the organizational lineup which is there, which will affect a gray zone warfare management. If you look at the force matrix, then on one extreme you have the peace, peace, and on the other extreme you have the war. And somewhere between these you have diplomacy, free markets, information operations, cyber warfare, assassinations, riots, protests, revolutions, proxy war, peacekeeping, and war. So therefore, the activities between the peace and war are the ones which would form part of the gray zone, which I just mentioned, and the organizations which would be conducting these would be extending from private citizens up to the military to handle the gray zone warfare. So therefore, if we have seen what are the organization and the force intersection of gray zone warfare, then the elements which would be required to develop our organizational doctrine would be and some of them have already been covered by General Bhalla. They are below the threshold of war. B, they unfold gradually. C, they lack attributability. So therefore, your organizations must not be overt organizations. They cannot outrightly be seen as raised for conducting gray zone warfare. They should stop short of threatening the defender's vital or existential interest. Obviously, so you don't want a full-fledged war because wars are costly, as highlighted by Jan Krishnan. Convey the risk of more violent militancy. This is very tricky. This is based on my study that the gray zone warfare must somewhere convey a risk of more military action. So it should be also acting as some kind of a deterrence. We have conventional forces or the unconventional forces being used as strategic forces being used as deterrence. I think there is a scope for displaying your gray zone capabilities, which General Krishnan also highlighted. And a great example of this is the Chinese when they actually disrupted Mumbai power grid, which was running fail safe from 1985 till 2020 October, post the Galwan incident. Although the government of India came out and said that no, it was a technical error and there's nothing to do with disruption by the Chinese, but there were state agencies which confirmed that no, it was actually some kind of a hacking. The jury is still out, but suffice it to say that the gullibility factor aside, a display of gray zone capability was done by the Chinese. Similarly, I believe that the Pakistanis have now attained the capability of interfering into our ATC systems. Now, this is something which has come from somebody from the civil intelligence agencies, but I take it with a pinch of salt. But if it happens, then the prospects of gray zone warfare are going to go into totally different dimensions. I hope I'm not. I hope he's not correct, and I hope this possibility is not correct. And the gray zone activities actually would be targeting vulnerabilities. So therefore, the organizations organization which we create must have the capability to link with the organizations where these vulnerabilities can be resolved. They say that it is better to solve the root of the problem than the symptoms. And I think gray zone warfare takes advantage of our fault lines. So therefore, the best way would be to solve those fault lines or resolve those fault lines. It's very easier said than done, but the attempt should always be there to do that. And lastly, the gray zone warfare includes positive, negative, and neutral action. Sometimes arms sale, which is a positive action, would actually contribute towards a gray zone activity. So therefore, what should be our approach to organizing ourselves for gray zone operations? See, today, as I said earlier, that we are in a very, very haphazard manner, dispersed, scattered, with various entities coming under various agencies. And I forgot to mention that in this, we have the superpowers who dictate their own set of rules and regulations, like the US or the Chinese are doing it in South China Sea, or the US has done in Africa or in other parts of the world. South America was in fact the hotbed of gray zone activity by the US during the Cold War. They almost interfere into 116 countries in change of governments in these countries, out of which 37 were successful. Change, rest failed. But the fact is that they did employ such means to wage a gray zone warfare. The CIA was the agency which was coordinating this thing. So all these fellows are going to be interfering into our gray zone, interfering through the gray zone mechanism into our country security domain. So therefore, the challenges which I summarize now lead. No organization has primacy over gray zone issues, leads to lack of unified and integrated management and responses. Aggregation is starkly missing, leading to everything falling in the lap of NSA. I may be wrong. Lack of civil military fusion, globalization and digitalization challenges in managing conduct and response. We have the strength in this, but somehow we have not been able to tap it for either a defensive or an offensive action as far as gray zone is concerned. Leaflets, rumors, radio, televisions, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, dark networks. Today, every person or every bot is a messenger. Managing gray zone influences in a democratic setup, already covered enough on this. Autocracies have an advantage and play with democracies at lib. China and Pakistan are a great example of this. As far as India is concerned, a whole of government approach is easier said than done, with our fault lines within the government at the central level, and also the turf war which goes on between state and the center. We need a major overhaul of our security infrastructure. So therefore, what should be conceptual doctrinal framework for proposed organization? There is a need for interagency coordination capable of synchronizing all elements of national power. National security structure must be responsive, integrated, and adaptable. Need to develop non-military capabilities. Normally, we respond with either MOD or MHA. I think, in my view, there is a need for creation of Ministry of Data and Information Security. We must yank out certain things from the MHA, certain aspects from the MOD, create a separate ministry in the name of data security and information security. Obviously, it's a defensive name, but it can always be given an offensive charter. Something like this is already being attempted in Australia through an organization called PRISM. I think we can take a leaf out of that and start working on it in advance. Use of military may contain a security situation, but influence operations more essential to counter and discredit opposing narrative, and connecting people to legitimate governing structures. Here I'm talking of, we, despite having done good surgical strikes, somewhere we lost the narrative as far as information operations were concerned. So gray zone manifests in forms of symptoms. We need to go in for the root cause of the disease and not the symptoms. Okay, the suggested organization would be, there should be a Ministry of National Information and Data Security at the apex. The spectrum of information security should be military and non-military both. In the military domain, there should be a set of hierarchy which should be created, and so should be in the case of non-military domain. Who should be heading this? Who should not be heading this? I'll briefly cover that separately. The spectrum should be from war, external policy, government, national, to crime, internal policy, private and local. So therefore, between these boundaries, this ministry should be working. As far as military is concerned, we need to expand the role of Defense Intelligence Agency into National Military Information Operation Agency. This is something which I have come up with. Role should be cyber information interoperation across borders. There should be strong media management agency as ADGPI, as ADGPI falls short of expectation under this agency. Enlarge cyber agency to include both defensive and offensive measures. Creation of the above capabilities and suitable structures at the integrated theater command levels as and when they come up, and operational formations. As far as the teeth is concerned, it should also have agile and lean, technologically empowered special forces to provide better response in encountering gray zone threats. If we follow this kind of a hierarchy, a more structured, more organized hierarchy rather than a dispersed hierarchy militarily, I think our military information and security would be taken care of. And this would, of course, be directly responsible to the Ministry of Data and Information Security. The parallel channels can work with the MOD and the CDS in this case, but we need to yank this out and keep it in a manner that it can coordinate with the other agencies of the country as far as gray zone warfare is concerned. These are preliminary thoughts. As far as the civilian structure is concerned, in my view, the aggregation has to take place again under the ministry which I proposed, and the civilian hierarchy could be with the IB heading this entire initiative, and with the others working under it. As far as RAW is concerned, RAW will have to somehow link in with the IB. We cannot have a parallel organization trying to work with each other, because gray zone will have implications across as well as this side. So we can choose between IB and RAW. Who should be heading this civilian part of the gray zone warfare defensive as well as the offensive capabilities. The rest of the forces will have to aggregate. The CPFs today are having their own intelligence and intelligence setup, everybody giving their own independent views without actually laterally sharing it. I'm afraid the SMAC and the MAC, what we talk of, are ineffective. The information which comes in a SMAC or a MAC meeting is always old. It's never real time. There is a tendency for any force to first pass the message to its own headquarters. By the time they react, it is too late. Lateral sharing is very, very rare. Very few do it. The NTRO was trying to break this particular tendency, but even the NTRO has failed in many ways to actually give real-time information. They have been doing it, but it is basically what I was trying to say is that as far as the civil organizations are concerned, we can choose between most likely it would be better to have the raw heading it, because it also has an external role, and then rest of the agencies falling under it. The raw also works under the PMO, so that way there'll be a direct passing of information, passing of instructions, which would be more holistic in nature. Although the IB also briefs the PMO, but then the PMO controls RAW directly. So therefore, if RAW is heading it, IB falls under it, and rest of the central police, armed forces, agencies must be aggregated under one single head, like we have the DIA, a similar kind of agency. The other agencies which are in the MHA must
We have lost your.
You're not audible, General Singh.
Dushyant sir, not audible.
we must aggregate it and then try it out in a pilot project manner. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Excellent talk, marred by the technical glitches notwithstanding. But
that's gray zone. That's gray zone.
That's the gray zone of our warfare. Well, I was listening to all this. I was taken to my school days, and that's what I drew for you. You can have a look. The gray zone warfare looks like something this. You can develop and further refine it. Military and non-military zones where there is overlap or don't overlap, that is the place where gray zone warfare plays and plays havoc.
Yes.
And this is how it must be, it can be refined further. And notwithstanding that,
this is an old diagram which is floating around. I wish I had shown presentation the matrix of civil, military, and the force levels. I have created a new paradigm that I will share it separately of my presentation. You all can go through that.
Right, sir. That would be welcome. It was off the cuff. I thought I would share it with you. I now invite the question answers with the all three speakers. If you have any questions, there are many questions which are on the chat box. So those who have originated, they are at liberty to ask the questions to the speakers directly. Most welcome. Please.
Utkarsh, before that, I can take 2 minutes.
Please, please. Thank you.
Okay. With the permission of the chair, it was a great session with General Bhalla clearly enunciating the challenges, and General Krishnan coming out as usual with great insight into his thoughts, which was very clear. And the doctrinal needs, General Dushanth has absolutely made it clear, and this is what we are looking for in future to happen. So what I want to say, there is a point regarding the end state in gray zone warfare. The end state need not be capture. It is a capture of physical capture may not be there in the end state of gray zone warfare. Military is there definitely. What is the intention? What is the idea of the perpetrator or the country which is doing it? The end state need not be physical capturing of a country. So it actually needs to subjugate the target country economically and psychologically, and the target country will be finally ruled and exploited as per desire of the perpetrator. For that, nowadays you don't have to capture the country. You can make use of the youth. You can make use of the people who will follow them. You don't have to capture the country. And they're like you must have come to know Russia annexed Crimea, but their parliament passed it, so it became part of this thing. So it's still being ruled by the parliament, and Crimea is there. But that is how it can happen at that. Now the other thing is we are a democracy, and there is a question by Utkarsh also saying that will it happen in authoritarian countries or the other type of where single party is ruling. Democracy works in the principle of the people, by the people, and for the people, as defined by the great Abraham Lincoln. In India, most of the political parties preach socialism, reservation, and to a great extent, appeasement. So it is on this because they are looking for votes to come to power. Many politicians follow the feudal system and such practical dynastical political which has acceptance in many societies. So many politicians are following this, and this practical dynastical politics which has acceptance in many societies. So in actually speaking, well, maybe a picture will bring you, maybe a Bollywood film will bring you in together, maybe a cricket match will bring you together, or when you get an Olympic medal, it bring you together. But within the society in India, there is this political, dynastical, and societal compulsions to remain in a group and this thing. It is because India is in various, divided into various states. The political parties and astute politicians, politicians are very astute, very fast in ability. I'm telling you because I've been brought up in a political family. And they know being in power at any cost is important for their welfare, the party's welfare and the cadre's welfare. It is in that, that is how it happens. In politics, next community is the, when you take politics, this is the politicians and the political parties. In the political domain, the next community is the bureaucrats. That is from Babus, from the section clerk level to the chief secretary. They are the permanent players in the governance and actually running the administration, which affects the population at large. So these are another targets. Why I'm telling, these are the targets which the perpetrator country will look at. And finally comes the judiciary. Judiciary is also very important, because nowadays you see for everything they so moto take, cognizance of what is happening. You're seeing across, for the last 5 years, you're seeing all these things happening. So the targets to manipulate are the political parties and their leaders, the bureaucrats, and the judiciary. Now, how to influence? Data mining and analytics to know the target population and their leaders is the major thing which technology is used. The entire data today, who is having the data of us? It is in the hands of big techs. And where is the big techs manufacturing? It is in China. So it is not only China, the big techs are also into this. Google, iPhone, whoever it is, there are so many of this. You're aware of who are the big techs. The entire data mining is very important. And after the data is there, analytics is done. How the business people, identify who is liking what and what is they're looking for is basically because of your Facebook post, your WhatsApp post, your your various express yourself. You are given your data, when you go to a shop, you are given your data, and the data is available all over. And this data is analyzed by business people to identify what they have to make. Similarly, the perpetrator countries will also analyze your data, and then they will decide how to target, when to target, and whom to target. So these are the important aspects. Dushin can also actually consider these things. Then there are certain other aspects which I want to cover. In 2009, in Indian political circles, civil society was outraged by a report from a Chinese think tank urging friendly countries to divide and bifurcate India by 2030 small nations. One of the parties, they refused to criticize this aspect in India. I'm talking about 2009. One of the parties refused to do it, criticize China. On being questioned multiple times of his silence, their leaders maintained that a party cannot react without ascertaining the authenticity of the report. So this is, you can see how certain countries are actually started doing these things. And, China has been trying to influence Indian politics through kind as well. In 2017, a regional channel broadcast the visuals from one of the, headquarters, one of the party headquarters in New Delhi, in which staff of Chinese embassy were seen carrying gifts to the party headquarters. So what does it mean? And these are the way they are doing it. In another article published in the Face Off during, in one of the mouthpiece of one of the parties, mouthpiece newspaper of one of the parties, the party blamed India and favored the Chinese standpoint. It is carried the statement of the spokesperson of China's foreign ministry arguing Indian Army on 15 July violated that agreement in a serious way. The Indian Army breached China's border borderline twice for their legal work. These are sort of thing, how politics is being manipulated by, China or any other, country who wants to actually carry out, this thing. Because China and our trade is, totally in favor of China. From Diwali to various other things to the pictures and the gods are all manufactured in China because it is cheaper, because they got bonded labor there. So these are the aspects which you have to see. So like General Ballah sir really brought up this issue. How we'll keep saying that we'll not take Chinese stuff, but how much they. So there is a requirement of understanding this particular aspect, and politicians are they are hellbound to come to power, because what is important for politicians to be in power and remain there for a long time. Today there is another aspect is that in India we don't have a very legible, very good opposition. That's also not a good thing. Now it's a question of mixture of people and all those things. So we have to be prepared for that. So this sort of thing. It is not that China is only following certain party. In fact, before the event, before the event happened in Galwan, there was information that these people are, the Chinese people at various levels are following the ruling party MLAs and MPs also. But somehow it didn't work out, and they would have even manipulated that to get a support for the country which I'm speaking about. So these are the aspects, and how exactly these things will take place. The another one, how Babus will be influenced is very easy. There are a number of incidents in which their children are given admission in various places, and it is being taken care of by who is saving the money, who knows. Similarly is the politicians' children. They get admission in various places. As we are aware that many of the educational institutions, I think General Ballah only has brought out, or no, General Krishna has brought out educational institutions which are not functioning, and these are being funded by various universities across the world. Is being funded by various organizations which has got support from various countries. In such places, these politicians' sons, politicians' progeny, or the babus, or even they may even try it with military people. It cannot be ruled out. So this is how the gray zone warfare will manipulate, will come out in various levels of political governance of a country. It can happen to judiciary also. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for giving an opportunity.
Rajiv, you have a point. You have raised your hand. Please tell what is it? Atre, sorry.
Sir, thank you very much. Well, there are a few questions that are in the box, so I think we should go to those first before I ask my question, or if I have your permission, I'll talk
please
right
do
away.
that. Please do that.
Well, sir, you see, General Krishnan talked about unemployed media people and unemployed veterans and others. And of course, General Dushanth Singh at length talked about the need for relevant institutions to handle grey zone warfare and intelligence agencies.
The other. One area of employment, both for unemployed media people and for unemployed veterans, seems to have been think tanks. Think that the forces have their own think tanks, and there's of course the growth of private think tanks in India. Can you hear me, sir?
No, your voice is gone.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, now?
Yeah, please go ahead. We can hear you.
There are a number of think tanks, as I said. So
okay, Atre, I've read your question in the chat in the box. Can I answer it?
Please, sir.
All right. I think you got my point a little wrong when I mentioned that unemployed media and disgruntled ex-servicemen or veterans like us, and even some ex-civil servants and all. I meant they are easy prey for an adversary to carry on with their grey zone warfare activities. One. Second is just without going into the specific details, in a very general term, I must say, the farther we move away from considering grey zone warfare as a military domain aspect, the better we will do. See, there are so many economic activities which are under the Ministry of Finance, under the Corporate Affairs, under the MHA, under the Foreign Ministry. The moment we make it look like a predominantly a defense-oriented or an MOD's baby, everybody gets suspicious and it will never work. It is better that the defense become just a part of it. And it is for good reasons that I am saying, because if you see all the elements which are in effect today against us, it is the media, it is the cyber, it is the economic activities. It is not so much the military. I'm not saying the military is out of it, very much it is part of it. And maybe at least in the current times, we understand its tools and implications and the way it is being carried out better than most others, because we think about it. The greatest service we can do, whether as individuals, as experts, or as think tank, is to drill it, to bring it home, write about it, talk about it, create awareness, and make everyone know that this is a threat, not in being, it is already being implemented, waged against us, and we need to guard, whether it is schools, the newspapers, the TV channels, the economic affairs, or anything you name, and it is there. Therefore, we are. I know a lot of people don't like me to say that we are not the most significant, the part of it. We are just a part of it. There are so many others which are far more critical, which come into play on a daily basis, which are being exploited, including the political minds, and which Brigadier Sandeep touched upon. So I think that it is in that context that I mentioned about it. No, I do not think veterans and all are required to be employed. No, this is not a part-time job. It is a full-time. It is maybe something which the PMO will have to undertake. We have, like I mentioned, I believe that there are wherewithal is not the problem. The problem is an agency to, provide, to bring everything together whenever required, to give direction to a particular resource wherever it be lying. It may be one of our embassies in a foreign country. It may be a corporate entity, private corporate entity within the country. Now, it is to give an direction to each of these agencies that we need an entity, an agency. And I do know, I feel the best would be the PMO, which will automatically, by default, carry a lot of authority with it. Thank you. I hope I have answered your question, at least in
you
part.
have said, but sorry,
Yeah.
that was not my point.
There is Ambassador Anil Trigunath has raised hand. Please ask your question.
Very good morning, and brilliant presentations, and very insightful. On this media thing, I know that I've been watching, and as a retired diplomat, I also get invited to many of these debates. And I agree with you that about this unemployed. I mean, those who are retired from the government are not really unemployed, and they should not leave their loyalties behind. I mean, irrespective of political dispensations that they attribute to. But I have made a suggestion even in the VIM one time. The problem with the people is we live in the past, or we live by the writings or the papers that we read written by some people, which are very often not current with the thinking of the government and what is the government's position there is. So while going to the media, and whenever as a general or as a diplomat we go on the media, the public, they tend to take you very seriously. They think that you know the things that are happening. You might have a domain expertise, at the same time we are not really current with what is happening. So I have suggested to the government, I said there are about 50, 60 people who are actually mostly on the TV channels and different places, and that plays a great role both for India, and it is monitored by all the foreign government exactly what's going on. It tends to give a very wrong picture of many of the policies that are being done, because we presume that that is being done while it may not actually be done. So I said there could be a joint mechanism by the MEA and the MOD or any other body, where at least once in a while, where there are key issues on which the national security is impinging, they should be at least briefed what is the government's line. Not necessarily that they can dictate to us what to speak. We can maintain our own this thing, but to a great extent, we'll be able to provide a fair picture, I would say, of what is the government's idea. At the end of the day, all of us are patriots and nationalists and everything, irrespective of our differences with the political dispensation. But the facts, at least, we should know. And very often, I have had to. I mean, we are pitched against the political party leaders, Congress and BJP and all that sometimes. And then you get mauled in between the two, and then you are not able to tell the truth because you are yourself not aware very often. Whatever little information we get is by talking to some of them. So this was just a comment exactly how to really, which can be a good thing in our solution, actually, partly for this gray zone warfare tactics and when we deal with the media. Thank you.
General Rajiv Bhalla had raised hand. Sir, please.
If I may,
Shekhar, I'll come to you later.
If
please.
I may just answer a couple of questions and give my comments, what are there. What I want to say is, firstly, the ends are political objectives, political goals identified by the aggressor or by the opponent, which is there. It may not be capture of territory, but it could be political goals, which may be anything under the sun. So we are not looking at that. The second aspect is, somebody asked a question, Brigadier Sandeep, how can the political domain be manipulated? I think everybody is prone to manipulation. We in India are a different kind of a society. After living under the rulers for so many centuries, after being under the colonial rule, we have started looking at self-preservation. So we can be all manipulated. The question is the extent of manipulation. I think we need to get out of that role, get out of that psyche, and get into a nationalistic movement, nationalistic ideology, nationalistic psyche during peacetime. While we all get together during a crisis, during external threat, but what is important is during peacetime we need to do this. So the political domain is as prone to manipulation as any other setup, I would say. How it can be manipulated is, if you recall, the foreign funding which comes to political parties, they could attach annexures to it to say that we want these laws to be passed in the countries, which they may be prone to accepting it. If you remember, a couple of years ago, the foreign funding, I think Supreme Court passed an order that the foreign funding before so many years need to be publicized and need to be put in the public domain. The legislature passed an order in the parliament to say that with retrospect of last 20-30 years, there's no need to publicize this. There's no need to bring this to the public domain. So you see, there are ways and means to do it, whether it's the judiciary, it's the executive. Let's not look at it. What is important is the public needs to be brought into the gamut of education about the gray zone warfare. Are we capable of doing it? It's a big question. It's a big Herculean task. I don't think we are capable of doing it. So to put us on the defensive, to let people know that we are on the gray zone warfare campaign being launched by somebody else, what we need to do is we need to create an organization. I would not say IB and all this. There need to be a senior level of person, and it should not be. It should be a separate organization which needs to be formed, an apex body, and somebody very senior in terms of status, an expert, not a politician, but an expert who takes a position of a MOS or a cabinet rank, and like the NDMA which got formed and they did a task. We need to have something like the Homeland Security, which is there in the US, and have that organization with various organizations or various reps of the organization under them, and they take charge. And we need to go for offensive action, actually. I think 75 years is too long a time for us to be on the defensive and on the back foot and accepting a lot of nonsense from the external players who have been playing with us. We need to now go on the offensive, and I think defense is the best, offensive is the best form of defense. And it's time to go in and not suffer anymore. So if we go offensive, we need not guard against all this. We need not put people aware of this, because the other people will be on the back foot and not us. Thank you.
Rajshekhar, you wanted to speak? Yeah, please.
Thank you. I have been listening to the discourses since yesterday and heard a large range of speakers with large range of views. And one thing has come out very, very powerfully is grey war is a reality. And India is in thick of it. Another thing that has come out very, very loud and clear that as of now, we do not have a central agency that has the ultimate mandate to mobilize national resources to fight this war. I mean, when I look around, there is no dearth of talent, no dearth of technological skills. We can develop, we can create anything. Counter this, but who is going to aggregate? Because everybody is fighting in a private war. Even sitting here as a think tank, we are fighting a private war on the gray zone. But this is just a drop in the ocean. We are all in the different direction. Somebody has to aggregate it. That is one thing that has come out very, very loud and clear. That ultimate mandate to mobilize the national resources to fight this war being waged on us. My question is, now I will be a little more philosophical because, okay, let us grant, and people have suggested what kind of a structure we should have, who should head it, who should do it. Let us assume that we have one such agency who is now all ready and geared up to fight. So my question is very philosophical. Mandate, will it be only defensive or will it be offensive? Because right now we are at the receiving end and we are talking about defensive. So it is just a food for thought that what would you recommend that agency mandate should be? To be an offensive organization like China and Russia are known to be, or develop just a defensive capabilities to defense our data, defense our cyberspace, and defend ours. So this is just a food for thought I am throwing open. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a wonderful confabulation on the gray zone warfare. And there is one more hand coming up. You please speak. Yeah.
Sir, sorry, just to carry on.
Atre. Yeah.
Sir, to carry on my last question, the issue is whether the larger issue is where do think tanks see themselves in the whole gray zone picture? We talk about agencies. Now, each of the armed forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, and the CDS office, each have their own think tank. Of course, there is IDSA, USI. There are private think tanks like ORF, Vivekananda Foundation, India Foundation are party political think tanks. Gateway House is another private think tank. Then the Chennai Center of China Studies is a good example. And of course, IIRF has come up as a think tank. Now, the question is, and to all speakers of this session, and maybe of all future sessions, please once address the question of where do you see think tanks in this whole sphere? Where do you slot think tanks in? And often in global think tanks, there are many Pakistani scholars come there. Some of the worst hawks from the defense establishment come there. And there is negligible Indian representation. I have had the pleasure of being the only Indian person present in conferences with a galaxy of Pakistani speakers and participants. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Coming up, Mr. Jay Govind. May I know your question, please?
Colonel Jay Govind, please unmute yourself and put on your video.
Good morning, sir. Sir, I have asked this earlier. I mean, as a remark, I have put. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I had asked this question, sir, how to make the political bureaucracy focus more on the grey war, grey zone warfare. Most of the speakers have spoken on these issues, sir. I would like to give a couple of points from my side also, sir, on this issue, sir. Uh, Firstly, sir, I wanted to bring out that the way we look at the strategy as a military man and how it is looked at by our political bureaucracy is slightly different, sir. As a soldier, sir, I would like to have the escalatory dominance over the adversary in all the fields, whether it is sub-conventional, conventional, or the strategic domains. Whereas if you look at in a democratic country like ours, our bureaucratic and the political leadership may have a slight different view on it. They
Others are requested to keep your video off.
how to me, sir? Okay. And how to manage it therefore thereafter, that is what people would like to do, that political as well as bureaucracy. So in such a scenario, sir, how do we leverage this different strategic perspective of the political bureaucracy in support of extending the fight against the grey zone warfare? So we must look at the various strategies which help the political bureaucracy to anticipate the risk of vertical and escalatory dominance in the gray zone warfare. So first thing which comes to our mind is the early warning, sir. How does the country come to get the indications of early warning of certain great ramifications of gray war zones, sir? So of course, the technical things in this, which some of these were discussed yesterday, like we have to have the graph nodes networks, which tell the connections of the people who are very actively working against us or in this domain, and then look at tools like sentiment analysis, which quickly tell you what are the situations which are developing on which we have to react to. Now, this is what somebody was mentioning towards the defensive kind of an activity, which is an early warning kind of a thing. And then there are these natural language processing kind of a things in which you can look at specific terms which are floating around on the internet, which is likely to get enhanced and take actions on this. So these are the defensive kind of a measures which, as a initial stage, the political and the bureaucracy would be very interested in, and thereafter we can graduate to the issues which we in military parlance talk in terms of the credible and the punitive deterrence issues which are there. Thank you, sir, for giving me a chance to speak.
Thank you, Colonel Joy Govind. Wonderful thing. I think the gray zone warfare, the ultimate aim is not to have a military conflagration. The ultimate aim of gray zone warfare is to remain subtle till the target state is incapacitated, is made totally dependable and a vassal state, which is happening around us. This is the thing. Nobody would like to show off gray zone warfare capability by plunging the entire country into darkness by failing the power grid. No. Nobody would like to stop all trains. No. Because they would like to have a capacity and threaten. Every time when you wake up after a quarter and there's a debt servicing threat looming at your head, like Pakistan has, that is the effect and the hangover of gray zone warfare. That's how it works. It will never be displayed in that manner. It carries a infamy. It carries a reputation of being notorious. The KGB, the Mossad, they carry out one assassination and they get the notoriety of 10 more assassinations which happen, which they have not done. See, we have been linking China with this helicopter crash. Chinese have never issued a denial because they are relishing it. They are relishing and basking in this glory that we are really, that entire nation or some section of population believes that we have done it. That's the kind of notoriety you gain. In the conventional warfare, you annex territories. In gray zone warfare, the victim state offers the territory on a platter to you, a vassal state, totally dependable, incapacitated. So that kind of end state they aim at. How it can be prevented? It's a continuous process. It's not like you raise one battalion or two battalion and that would suffice to guard up, say, pass or something. No, it is a continuous state. In India, we are very weak on two things. One is impact analysis. Whatever comes to us, we go whole hog on it, be it plastic, be it mobile phone, be it anything which comes from outside, we go whole hog on it. And thereafter, after 20 years, we say this is causing pollution, that is causing this addiction, that is causing that problem. So first thing is that risk and threat analysis. There should be a credible organization which should do the risk and threat analysis of everything every day on daily basis. Then comes the impact analysis. Well, we are importing this technology from such and such country. What is the impact? Well, our trade imbalance is growing every quarter like this. What is the impact? Can we reduce it? Can we reduce dependency? No. When the COVID hit us, we certainly realized that paracetamol cannot be made in India, though we are the largest producer, but the bulk drug comes from China. That came. He said, if Chinese don't give, it cannot be made. And a silly drug like paracetamol has done its business in billions of dollars during COVID, because this was the drug for lowering the temperature. So these things have to be read by some sensible person, whether is active bureaucrat, active economist, or a retired bureaucrat or retired economist. Everybody has a value. So this thing is required. Then the politicians, where they can damage the country is, first thing is the country's unity. That country's unity can be damaged by politicians to a great extent, and they are doing it. This is the problem. They are unscrupulous. There are so many splinter groups, non-political also, who are very eager to receive foreign funding, and they will do their bidding. This is another issue which we should understand. Now comes what technical capability we want to counter the gray zone warfare. It's a very, very open-ended statement I'm making, because there are many fields. Is it necessary that we we give our data to everybody? All the thing. My car insurance is due in December, and I'm getting 4 phone calls from every day. I mean, my phone is with the insurance is with Tata AIG, and I'm getting it from Bajaj Finance, because they have already sold it somewhere. So everybody is asking me, and they are all shooting me that get an insurance from us. Fans and Patel tells me what is the date of birth of my wife, or what is the date of birth of my sister, because they have been storing my data. So this data plundering is another big problem which we have created ourselves. I don't know how it can be actually done. So when we come with dependency, we should have dispersed our eggs in many baskets rather than offering it to China, and realizing after 2 decades that we have a huge trade imbalance. And that is the one big problem. Not only imbalance, they can shut the supply. Not only this, because of Chinese small cheap goods, we have stifled the industry in India, indigenous industry. So there's long-term view. It has to be taken by everybody. The kinetic means, the military means are important. They are a big, big deterrent. They remain there. But when they talk about that Chinese have raised cyber warriors force, I think it is time for to deploy people, good people with clear head, who can understand our risk and threats, who can read between the lines of those MOUs and agreements which we do with the other countries. And we should understand the impact, what we do, the impact which will bring after 2 decades. That is where we actually lacking, and that should be the framework of the organization which we are thinking about. And this is very important. Uh, um, Atre said about think tanks. Think tanks influence decision. Unfortunately, in India, the think tanks line of thinking is not taken very seriously by the government. This should be actually, the think tanks are only entertained by the color of the what color they wear on the sleeves. That should not be there. On a lighter note, I would tell Ambassador Anil Trigunath, in Pakistan, they stopped all military officers from appearing on television, and the general headquarters issued a license to some 100 military officers. They are entitled to appear on national television. But sadly, even that did not work. The image of Pakistan has not improved. So anybody who wants to come to the television and air his view or her view is most welcome. The electronic media is a loose cannon in India. It has to be regulated. Sooner or later, it will be realized by everybody that it has become a big nuisance. Yesterday, I was on television. The field reporter was saying that government should answer the conspiracy behind this crash. So I asked that guest coordinator, I said, is there any conspiracy? Is there any lead? He said, no, sir, production वालों ने बोला है बोलने के लिए. So this is the how they hype up the things. For the person who is seen a snippet of this particular telecast, he will go home, he say, oh, there was a conspiracy which brought down this helicopter. That is how they do it. So this sooner or later has to be done. But I must thank the speakers, General Rajiv Bhalla, General Krishnan, General Dushyanth Singh. I must thank the President and Secretary of IIRF for giving me a chance, and must thank everyone who participated in discussion. It's a very new discipline. It has many ramifications, and it requires a serious study. Let's see, it is taken up by the government, and even if it is not taken up by the government, the IIRF, I'm sure, would continue doing a good job of it. And thank you very much for inviting me and giving me a chance to share this session. Thank you so much.